Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann, and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to say thank you to the group for inviting me to speak. It is always just such a great honor to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date is November 1st of 2011, and for that I am eternally grateful. So I got sober in November, and Shannon, our first speaker, talked about meditating for 10 years. And when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, everyone was talking about step 11. Everywhere I went, they were talking about step 11 the whole month. And I just thought, oh, you just don't drink and pray and meditate and you're ready to go, you know? And I was kind of shocked to find out that there were, 10 other steps, right? And so I am a big believer in the steps. Although in the beginning I didn't really know that much about them. But I started doing them right away. I got really lucky on the first day that I got sober because I landed at the Serenity Club in Las Vegas, and there was a woman there who volunteered to be my first sponsor, and she started guiding me through the steps, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I knew that I had a situation with alcohol. And in the beginning, I just came to Alcoholics Anonymous with this concept of I need to take a look at my drinking. I didn't really know that I was an alcoholic. It was really confusing to me because alcohol made me feel better for years. I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, not too far from here. As a matter of fact, I'm just so blown away by this view. It is so cool to be here and have that city. It just blows my mind. And I want to say special thanks to Keith for showing me the view from outside. Like, he just knows all the best places, and so he that was very, very special. So thank you for that. So I grew up here in Las Vegas, and I just did what everybody else was doing in the neighborhood. Like, we started kind of, dabbling with alcohol when I was about 12, 13 years old, and it didn't look like I got drunk right away. It just looked like what all the other neighborhood girls were doing, which was we just would take a few sips of, something in the liquor cabinet and be on our way. I don't remember the sparks flying or having any kind of spiritual connection. I just remember it burned, and it just felt weird, and we just kind of went on our merry way. And then when I was about 13, 14 years old, I started basically binge drinking on a regular basis on the weekends. And so did my friends. So that's the people who I was hanging out with. Like, we were doing the same thing. And before, sooner or later, I just kind of, we just all kind of came together, and I was hanging out with all the other kids that were doing the same thing as I was doing. And it didn't look weird. We would talk about, I would black out, and we would just talk about losing time. We'd call each other the next day on the phone. Do you remember what happened? Do you remember what you did? And oh my God. And it wasn't, it was alarming, but it wasn't really that alarming because that's what was happening with everybody else. So it was just hidden, it was hidden, this thing. And so that by the time I got to college, I had a fake ID that was it was a real ID that I had gone down to the Department of Motor Vehicles and with somebody else's birth certificate and got a driver's license in her name, and and I protected that ID with all I had, because I could get, at 16 years old, I started drinking in bars. But again, you guys, that's what we were doing, and we were going to watch bands, and we were having, so really I thought that was what I was after, was the music, man, but really what was happening is we were just getting really drunk. And that was a good time, you know, and I'm not going to tell too many drunk stories. I'll just tell two drunk stories because I think that they're very kind of, they just kind of stand out. So when I was like 16, 17 years old, we used to go to Bryan Head to go skiing. And my parents would just let us go. And it's not that they didn't care. I was very loved and cared for as a child. Like my parents really did deeply care where we were. But we were allowed to drive up to Bryan Head by ourselves. And so we would leave after school on Friday, which, 4 or 5 o'clock, and we would drive to southern Utah, and then we would, there was a bar in Cedar City that was right on the edge of town, and it was at the first exit. And now it's just been swallowed up by Cedar City, because Cedar City has gotten, it's not as big as Las Vegas, but it's grown along with this part of the country, right? But we would stop in this bar, and in Utah in the 1980s, you needed to have a sponsor to drink in a bar because they were private clubs. And so in order to drink at a bar in Utah, you had to be a member. And so you could bypass the membership by getting a sponsor. And so our little 16-year-old selves would roll into the bar, and we'd be like, can we get a sponsor? And there would always be, inevitably, somebody at the end of the bar that would say, sure, I'll sponsor you. And so then we would drink, we'd have a couple beers, get buzzed or whatever, and then make our way, up to Bryan Head, which was about, 45 minutes to an hour away from Cedar City. And that was my first experience with sponsorship. So there's that. So that's as a teenage drunk me. And then college was college, and learned how to play pool really well. I'm a good pool player. Actually hustled my dad one time for a car stereo playing pool, and he wasn't the dad, God bless him, he wasn't the dad that would let me win. Like, if it was a bet, it was a bet, and he was gonna try. And so I beat him at pool, which was kind of a thing because he was really good at pool, and he was shocked, but he bought me the car stereo, and it was great. And so when it was right before I got, not right before I got sober, but as I was, I would, for me, like my story with bottoms is that I would hit bottoms constantly throughout my 29 years of drinking. I basically consider that I started drinking when I was 12, and I got here when I was 41 years old. So I had a lot of bottoms over those years, and I just failed to recognize them. I really believe that. Like, I really feel like I would hit these bottoms, and they would hurt, and I would break bones, and there would be bruises, and there would be, catastrophic ending to relationships and this kind of stuff. But I would just, a few days later, you just kind of dust myself off, and the wounds would heal, and it would just be back at it, And so this one time, I'm telling this story for special someone who's here. This one time I was in China for the Olympics. So it was 2008. So I was 38 years old, and I was there, and we were there I was there with a group of friends, and we were having a good time, and I went to go see tennis at the Olympics, because I'm also, in addition to being an alcoholic, I'm also hopelessly in love with tennis. Like, tennis and alcoholism are huge for me. And so I was at the Olympics watching tennis, and one of my friends who I was there with had gotten sick of watching tennis, so she decided it was time to go back and meet her husband and our other friend who we were there with. There was 4 of us, and she was like, I'm just done with tennis. We'd been there for like 5 hours. So, and I'd been cocktailing, she'd been cocktailing, and she was like, it's time for me to go. Like, I gotta go eat dinner and get with my husband, and I can't just watch tennis like this. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll just meet you back at the hotel. And she was like, huh. So she took my face in her hands, and she said, Anne, we are in China. Are you sure you want to stay here by yourself? This is in Beijing, which is a 20 million person town, and I don't speak Chinese, just FYI, I don't speak Chinese. And I said, yeah, I'm good, ready to roll. So I got done, we got done watching she left. She was like, okay, I'm a grown woman, what's she gonna do? She can't talk me into leaving. So I sat there and I paced myself. I kept on drinking the cocktails, but I was pacing myself. So I wasn't drunk, but I was, by our standards, but by if someone would have given me a field sobriety test, I definitely wouldn't have passed it. So at like 2 o'clock in the morning, the tennis was over and it's time to go, and everyone pretty much was gone from the Olympics at this point. And so I had to find a car to take me back to the hotel that we were staying at. And so I don't know how I did it, but it's like you just like hail a cab in China, but I did. And so I'm drunk hailing a cab in China and managed to get in this cab, and the guy asked me where I'm going, and I didn't have, this is where I get like none too smart, right? Like we talk about in the big book, it talks a lot about these situations, at least for me, it's like where I'm none too smart. Like, so here's me like drunk in China being none too smart, and I have to basically help the cab driver with directions back to the hotel, and I don't really know how I did it. I credit my mother with that 100%, because when we were little and we would drive around Las Vegas, she'd always be like, we're turning left on Sahara, we're turning right on Koval, and she would always like make sure that we were paying attention, and that's what I've always done when I'm in a car. So I don't get on my phone, I still don't, I just pay attention where I'm going. So somehow I got back to the hotel, and the hotel was so new it didn't even have a marquee on it. So it was kind of a thing to find this hotel in China. So anyway, so that was a good one. That was a good one. But that was like kind of the story of my life. Like basically, just doing dumb stuff and really like having these near misses, these constant near misses, and that's one is kind of like a fun one, but some of the near misses were pretty bad, and they were pretty dangerous, and I put myself in a lot of compromised positions behind my drinking, and I'm really lucky to be here tonight as your speaker. Really, like, I don't want to go into all that, but I really, like, you just have to do the math. I'm from Las Vegas. I drank from the time I was 16 into blackouts most nights, and that's not an easy thing to survive. So it's November 1st, and I've done it again, and I'm sitting in this chair at the Serenity Club, crying, not just weeping like Hollywood movie stars. Like I'm like crying, and the lady behind the bar at the Serenity Club told me I couldn't go into the meeting that was happening because I was going to be late, and that I should wait for the next meeting. And so I just didn't even know what to do with myself. So I was sitting in this chair crying, and this guy was like 2 chairs down, and he started to say hi, and I was like, I looked at him like, no, I don't want to talk to you. And I gave him the death glance, because a bar drunk like me knows how to make the death glance, So I gave him the death glance, like, don't even try. And I'm sure he wasn't trying to, do anything bad. I think he was just trying to be nice. But he stood up and walked outside, and I was like, perfect. And so about, 2 minutes later, this lady comes back, and she's wearing a suit, and she's blonde, and she's well coiffed, and she sticks out her hand, and she says, hi, smiling, and I'm Jeannie. Who are you? And I'm just like, oh my God, who is this lady? She looks like every lady from every HR department that's ever fired me from every job I've ever had. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, this, what is even now what's happening? And she sat down with me, and she asked me what I thought were some rather rude and invasive questions. And she asked me my name. She asked me how I got there. And I told her I drove, and she kind of got a little hot with me about that, and I wasn't meaning to be a smart aleck. I really wasn't, and I am a lifelong smart aleck. I've gotten in trouble for my smart aleckness over the years a lot, and I really wasn't trying to be wise ass. I was trying to just tell her I drove, and really that's the truth. Like I drove myself to Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I hated myself so much by the time November 1st of 2011 rolled around that I just couldn't stand myself anymore. And so I drove to Alcoholics Anonymous, and she said, don't go anywhere. I have to go chair the meeting, but don't go anywhere. We're gonna talk after the meeting. And I did that. I listened to her, and I went into the meeting that she was chairing and sat in the front row. And I just sat there, and I was just like, what is going on? And by this time in the day of November 1st of 2011, I'd been crying so much all day that my contact lenses were so fogged up that I couldn't see, but I could hear. And I could hear the people in the meeting, and they were happy, and they were talking about their lives. And I couldn't remember the details of what they were talking about, but they were talking about the stuff that you talk about before the meeting. They were talking about their kids and their families and maybe their jobs or their dogs or whatever. They were just talking, and they were happy, and it was like, you know, like they talk about like the symphony of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was what was happening. And I was not prepared for that kind of joy and happiness. I was hoping that Alcoholics Anonymous was miserable like me. And because that's what I wanted. I wanted to be surrounded by misery, you know, because I was so sad. And that's not what happened at all. Like they started the meeting, and it's a birthday meeting, and they had cake and candles, and people stood up and took chips, and they made me take a newcomer chip, and I didn't even know what that even was, but they said I had to do that, and so I did, because I didn't want to be rude, you guys. Like I just didn't want to be rude, and so I just did what I was told. And in the meeting, I don't remember not anything that was said in that meeting, not one thing that was said in that meeting. If somebody said, yeah, I have no idea what was said in that meeting. But I remember the way that I felt in that meeting, and really the way that I felt in that meeting was safe. For that hour, I felt safe, and I sat down with that lady, who looked like the HR lady, and she gave me a big book, and she handed it to me, and she said, "Here's this big book," and I was like, "How much do I owe you?" And she said, "Don't worry about it. You just give somebody else a big book someday." And I had the money on me to pay the $8 for the big book, but she said, "Don't worry about it. Just give." And I agreed to that. I said, "Okay, that's fine. I can agree to that." And so, in a lot of ways, that agreement is what brings me here tonight, because I owe Alcoholics Anonymous everything. And I have not been able to give away enough big books to feel like I'm giving back in any, I just don't feel like I'm ever getting equal with Alcoholics Anonymous. And Shannon, thank you again for coming out. I got really involved with Alcoholics Anonymous right away. I fell in love secretly at first with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started to do stuff. And it wasn't really my choice necessarily, but I would just, my first sponsor told me that to say yes. She said, if it's AA and it's really truly authentically AA, it will never hurt you, it will only help you. And the reason why that came up in our conversation was because on Wednesday of the week that I met her, which November 1st was a Tuesday, so the next day was a Wednesday, I went to a women's meeting at the Serenity Club, and they asked me to do a reading, and I said no. Just a reading. And I said, "No, thank you," and they were like, "Okay." And so I called her that night, and I told her about it, and she said, "You did what?" And I said, "I just said no, thank you." I don't even know why I told her I didn't do the reading. I'm not sure why that got brought up, but I told her that, and she said, "Okay, hold the, Aunt." She's like, "You don't ever say no, especially to the reading. Like, no, that's not what we do." And I was like, "Okay." So I got in AA trouble, And I kind of live today. I do not ever want to get in AA trouble. Like, I've been in so much trouble over the years, you guys, like, I do not want to get in AA trouble. So that's just been kind of like my guiding philosophy over the years. I have gotten in AA trouble, but I not in bad trouble, just, so I was like, okay, so I say yes. And so a few weeks later, there was a Thursday night meeting that my first sponsor had introduced me to, and it was time to hand out commitments, and so they asked me to do the donuts. And so this meeting was dead serious about their donuts, and it was a closed AA meeting, and they had, at the time, there was a lot of long-timers that used to go to this meeting, and they were regulars, and they had special donuts that they needed to get every week. And so I said, yes, I'll do the donuts. And they said, okay, and they gave me a list of 7 donuts that had to be in the box. And then the other 5 were my choice. And so I was like, ooh, I get to choose 5 donuts. And so I started bringing the donuts to this meeting at 7 o'clock. And so what that looked like was, it was the beginning of the year. So it would have been right about this time of year in 2012 that I started bringing the donuts to this meeting. And I would go to the same donut shop and get the donuts, and then I would go to the meeting and bring them their donuts, and they would always be happy because they had all their donuts. And so I would do this donut march every Thursday, and I would be talking to my mom on the phone, on the way down to get the donuts. And my mom always called the Thursday night meeting the donut meeting. She's like, oh, you going to the donut meeting? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the donut meeting. She's like, oh, that's great. And so what was happening is I was getting to know the guy that was behind the bar, at the donut shop, and he was my buddy, and he would always give me extra donuts. So it would be like 12 donuts in a dozen, but I would get like 15 donuts because he would always like shove a few extra donuts in there for me. And so he was becoming my friend, and you got to remember, like, I'm brand new in the headlights. I mean, I don't feel like I have any friends in the world right now, you know what I mean? Like, you guys were my only friends. That's not really true. Like, I had plenty of friends, but I just didn't feel like I did. And you guys were sort of like bringing me back to life, because my heart was frozen. I froze my heart, over the years, one drink at a time. And so it's taken a long time for my heart to become unfrozen. And I don't know that it's all the way thawed yet, but it's getting there. So thank you, you guys. So with them doing these donuts, bringing the donuts, and I've probably been doing the donuts for like, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months. It was summertime. And I ended up being late to get the donuts. And so I was late to the meeting. And so what that meant, I got there at like 7:05, and I was freaking out because I didn't mean to be late. I was not trying to run late. I was late because somebody else made me late, and I know that that's not really the truth, but really it was the truth because she made me late, and I'm not going to get into that. But I was late, and I got to the donut meeting, and it had started. And the readings had started and the whole thing, and I showed up, and I'm, rip into I'm here, and I set the donuts down. They stopped the meeting, you guys, and everybody got up and walked over and got their donut, and then sat back down, and then the meeting continued. Now, I don't know if you guys, some of you guys know which meeting I'm talking about, so you guys know that it was a very serious AA meeting. Like, there was no, it was serious. I mean, it's a great meeting, and I learned so much, and I'm so thankful to have been a part of it. But they were dead serious about Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were dead serious about those donuts, you guys. And so after the meeting, we're cleaning up, and this lady comes up to me, and she says, your commitment to these donuts is equivalent to your commitment to your Alcoholics Anonymous program. And I was like, what? I didn't say that out loud. In my heart, I say a lot of things inside of my head that I don't say out loud, which is a good thing for me and a very good thing for you guys too. Sometimes I say them out loud and I shouldn't, and that's how I get in AA trouble, but I typically don't say them out loud a lot. And so I was like, oh, how how dare she say such a thing to me, you know? And I was like, oh, okay, you know, that's what came out of my mouth, okay. And I got in my car and I was like, you know, she's kind of right. You know, she's right. Like, she's right. Like, and she was right. Like, you know, even though it wasn't my fault that I was late, like, I could have been better. You know, I should have been better. It was a commitment that I had made, and I should have been better. So I took that to heart. I took what she said to heart, and I am very serious about my Alcoholics Anonymous commitments today. Like, I don't try to be too serious about them, but I do take them seriously. And I really, you know, the donut thing actually became kind of hilarious because I ended up doing the donuts for like, I don't know, 3 years or something. I couldn't shake the donuts, you guys. Like new people would come to the meeting and we'd be like, oh, yay, donuts. And everyone would be like, perfect, let's have them do the donuts. And I would be like, okay, here's the donuts, here's the 7 donuts, and here's, you know, and then they would come for like 3 weeks and then they would leave and then I would get the donuts again. But what was happening with this whole donut thing, you guys, is that I was starting to be even though the donuts is not really that necessary a part of a meeting, but it was for me, you know, because it was helping me to feel like I was part of the operation. You know, I was part of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a meaningful part of that group. You know, of course, when they gave me the donut commitment, I thought I should have been the treasurer, okay? But that would take a while, you know, and I did become the treasurer of that meeting, I think. But today, I've been the treasurer of a lot of different groups, and I've served as the treasurer for District 7, and I currently serve as the alternate treasurer for Area 42. So I've got big, heavy duty commitments now, and I approach them in the same way that I approach the donuts. And I've been given the same gifts of that. You know, like these commitments that I take help me stay involved and feel a part of, and it helps me feel like I'm giving back, paying, you know, my first sponsor back for that free big book. And I can tell you, like, I never feel like I'm even with AA. I never feel like I'm even with AA. Like, I have a really wonderful life. And the fact is that I had a really wonderful life before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I just couldn't see it that way, you know? And you guys have helped me shift my perspective into something that seems to be a little bit more in tune with reality, you know, and in a lot of different ways, you know, in a lot of different ways. I think that, you know, the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and the practice of the principles and the traditions and, you know, for me, the concepts of Alcoholics Anonymous have helped me kind of become the person who I always thought I was, right? I'm becoming aligned with the woman who I always wanted to be when I was growing up, you know, and I couldn't get there, you know, the drinking, etc., you know, I couldn't get that thing in alignment. Like, I couldn't get the me who I thought I was and the me who would show up in the world to come together. And I don't know that it's really all the way together today, but it's getting there, you know. And I love that. I love that that I get the opportunity every day to practice these things, you know. And the last now 7 years of my life have been really interesting. Like, I got sober here in Las Vegas, and I was born here and raised here in Las Vegas, and I love Las Vegas. Like, I am a big fan of this town, you know, and I've been spending a lot of my time lately in this little town called Ely, Nevada, which is about 4 hours northeast of here, and it couldn't really be more opposite than Las Vegas. It has casinos. It has 4 casinos, smaller casinos. It has 4,000 people in the population itself is 4,000. There's 7,000 people in the county in White Pine County, and it's giant. It's like it's like geographic wise, it's bigger than Clark County, but there's no people. There's a lot of sagebrush. There's a lot of it's just different, you know. And so I've been spending about half my life up there, and sometimes more than half my life up there, and making my home up there, and being a part of the Alcoholics Anonymous fellowship up there. And that has been a challenge because there's 20 people there who are sober on purpose, and I'm not kidding. And so there's 3 groups, and there's basically 20 people who show up on a regular basis, but there's really like 6 people who are as passionate about AA as me. And I'm among the people in that town with the most sobriety, which is the kind of a little bit of a dangerous place for me, because I would prefer to be somewhere like dead in the middle. You know, I love being in meetings that have a large variety of sobriety. Like the newcomer is so important. And welcome, Mario. I'm glad you're here. You know, like the newcomer brings the fresh perspective. The newcomer comes at all this material and all these books and all these steps and the traditions and all that stuff with a fresh brain. You know, you guys bring your lived experience to the table, and you bring such an important piece of Alcoholics Anonymous to me, you know, because I can tend to, even with my, you know, I'm not that, so I'm 14 years in a few months sober, which is not that much sobriety really, but I can still tend to get a little, you know, old hat about stuff, you know what I mean? So the newcomer helps me stay focused and brings that fresh perspective. So I think that that's really important. And you know, the long timers, like you guys are so amazing because you have the experience. Like you've been through so many things that I'm gonna go through. You know, I've learned so much from watching you, and that's kind of a new thing for me, because before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I feel like I had to hit the wall myself in order to learn a lesson. And now, every so often, I'm able to learn a lesson through your guys' experiences. So thank you for that, you know. So this Ely piece has been really interesting because, like I said, I'm in service. I'm service to the area, and so District 19 is area 42. District 19 is basically White Pine County. So it's huge and tiny, you know, when it comes to AA. And so about a year ago, there was a woman who moved to Ely, and she was big into hospitals and institutions, and she was going to be the hospitals and institutions contact, and you know, and I was like, that's a great idea. You should do that. And so I was the outgoing district committee member, so I had the contact information for the hospitals and institutions people here who she could connect with. And so I was in the process of connecting her with them, and so that's all happening. And I was at the SAG-SIC meeting, and the SAG-SIC, for you guys who don't know, so the area 42 is split in half. It's got a north and a south. So I was at the southern area meeting, and we were talking about something or another at the meeting, and there was a guy who was online with the meeting, and he was from Reno, and he was the corrections committee chairperson from Reno. And so he was talking online on the meeting about how the Ely State Prison warden called him to start meetings at the Ely State Prison. And to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, is that Ely State Prison has always been the supermax. When it opened up in 1989, it was the maximum security prison, death row, the whole thing. Like, nobody gets to bring AA meetings or any other kind of meetings to the Ely State Prison because it's too dangerous, because the population is just too tough, and it's just not going to happen. But they flipped the population in late 2024 because they had a big dust up in the prison, and some people died. And so what they did was the Nevada Department of Corrections decided to move the population. So they decided to put the Supermax people here in Indian Springs, and they put the Indian Springs medium security people up in Ely. And so they wanted meetings. The people from down here went up there, and they're like, we want, they had a whole laundry list of things that they wanted to have. And so Ely State Prison started trying to figure out how to set that up. They'd never done that before. The staff had never had to deal with Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever anonymous ever before. And so the warden had called this guy in Reno thinking, that he could help. And the guy in Reno said, I can't help you, that's 6 hours away. And so we can't do meetings out there. And he's saying that on this online meeting. And I'm like, wait a minute, did he just tell the prison no? And I'm like, and I thought and I know the guy, and so I called him later that night, and I was like, hey, can you tell me what happened or what's going on? Because I need to back this out and figure out, because we have a fellowship of 20 people who would, be happy, probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, to start meetings at the Ely State Prison. And so he gives me the contact name for the warden, and he gives me his contact name for the Nevada Department of Corrections, because the guy in the north does bring meetings to the prisons up there. And so he sent me this lady's email, and I sent her an email the next morning, on Monday morning, and she banged back this email with me in it, and it was like every warden of every prison in Nevada and all the caseworkers who help make arrangements for AA meetings in the state of Nevada. And she was like, the Alcoholics Anonymous is an approved Nevada Department of Corrections, whatever word she used, and whatever we need to do to help this happen at Ely State Prison needs to happen. So this is in March, okay? And so so I fill out the application for the Nevada Department of Correction. I ask a couple people in Ely to fill out an application for the Nevada Department of Corrections. And the next thing I know, I'm getting invited to be cleared through the Nevada Department of Corrections at this class here in Las Vegas. I mean, it was just it all just kind of folded into place. It was unbelievable. It was wild, how it all just was and it was in place, and we were going to this meeting, and I'm on the phone in email contact with the caseworker at Ely State Prison, and we're talking about what an AA meeting might look like at Ely State Prison. And so the class was in May. It was on May 15th of last year, and it was me and a guy from the fellowship in Ely, and he and I got cleared first. And so we decided we're toggling around dates, when do we want to do meetings? And Tuesday nights for us in Ely is the best night, because there's no meeting on Ely at night on Tuesdays. And so we're like, okay, Tuesdays is the best night. And so she's like, okay, Tuesdays is the best night. I'm like, when do you think the first date should be? And she says, let's try for the first one on June 10th. Now, I didn't not thinking about anything about June 10th. I'm like, okay, June 10th it is. Let's put it in the books. We'll be there. What is that? What do we need to do? And so on June 10th, we put our not blue outfits on. I don't know if you guys know, but you can't wear blue to the Nevada Department of Correction because the people who live there wear blue. And so I have everything blue. Everything I wear is blue. So I'm like, oh my God, here we go. I got to get a new outfit for this whole thing. And I've never been to prison, and I've never even really been to jail, except for one time when I was 19 for obscene language in public and trespassing, and I wasn't drunk. And so that's a whole nother thing. But that proves that I am a drunk, right? Okay, so anyway, so we go and we do this meeting on June 10th in the Nevada Department of Corrections. And so you guys know that June 10th is a really special day for us. And so on Alcoholics Anonymous's 90th birthday, I was at the Ely State Prison basically doing a panel meeting for the prisoners there, and I couldn't even believe the turn of events. When I was here in Las Vegas, I never thought that I always appreciated H&I and thought that they did great work, and I was always a big fan, but I never really thought that it was for me, because I drove to Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, I never went to a rehab. I never went to jail except for the thing for the obscene language in public and trespassing. And then, but I was sober, so I didn't even, it wasn't, I just got fined. And so I wasn't really experienced and well-versed in that, in all that stuff. And so I didn't think that that was a direction that made sense for me. And so the world thought that that was a direction that made sense to me. And so today, we are carrying a meeting, not every Tuesday into the Ely State Prison, but just about every Tuesday into the Ely State Prison. On Tuesdays, they have a thing there called the train, where that's where they get their supplies, and the new people come and go on Tuesdays from there, so they don't like to have a lot of outsiders around. And I can tell you right now that it has, like, you know, that has added just another layer of enrichment and experience and fulfillment for me as a sober alcoholic. And, you know, I don't think that everybody has to carry meetings into the Ely State Prison. I don't think that everybody has to be the Area 42 alternate treasurer. I don't really even think that everybody has to do donuts, although I really am a big fan of donuts, the donut thing. But I just think that people, like, I hope that people find where they feel fed, you know, where they feel like they're getting, where they're able to feel like they are a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I was sitting, when the 10-minute speaker was talking, I was sitting and I was looking at the 12 steps, and, you know, the language that they're written in is so critical, because it's written in the we. You know, so in the very beginning, it starts talking about how I am a part of you guys, even though I didn't really want to be. I didn't really think about that was what was going to happen. You know, I just thought, you know, you know, I thought I just needed to take a look at my drinking. And I can tell you right now that over the last, you know, few years, I've taken a very serious look at my drinking, and the steps helped me do that. And the steps continue to help me do that, because, you know, I don't think of the steps as linear. I think of them as circular. And then they're also dimensional. So over the years, like, you know, my step one experience gets a little bit better, and it gets a little bit brighter, and it gets a little bit, it takes on a different thing. And it's like every step is like that for me. You know, and so, and really, like, how that happens is through you guys, is through sponsorship, it's through sitting in meetings and talking again about gratitude, and about step 3, and about, you know, all these different things. And I can tell you right now, it never gets old. It never gets old for me. You know, I didn't think that before I started going to Ely that I took Alcoholics Anonymous in Las Vegas for granted. I mean, there's 1,200 meetings here. I mean, it's just so many meetings, you know, and I enjoyed all the meetings that I used to go to here on a regular basis. I really did, and I didn't think that I was taking that for granted. But I'll tell you what, like, being in Ely for the last 7 years, I think I took a lot of stuff for granted, you know? I mean, it is, you know, it's hard when there's 3 home groups and 20 people, and, you know, and basically 5 meetings a week. Like, that's no easy task. Like, I can't just get mad and go to another meeting. I have to get mad and sit down and sort it out, and run it through the 10th step, and do the amends, and make those things right, because I can't live in that kind of misery. You know, I've got to be, you know, I've got to be getting in alignment with this person on a regular basis. And so that's what I do. You know, I take it seriously, hopefully not too seriously, where, you know, I'm prickly about stuff. You know, I hope that, you know, that I remain teachable. I hope I remain approachable. I hope that I, you know, that I set a good example. I hope that you guys have been entertained for at least 12 minutes of this 45-minute talk. But I really, like, more than anything, I think I just want to say thank you to you all. I know I owe some specific people in this room like a debt of gratitude, and I just want you to know that I do appreciate you, and I do, you know, love you very much, and, you know, thank you for my life. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.